Okay, good evening, everybody. I think we'll begin. There will be a recording for those that can't join us. I think everyone's probably just trying to finish off their POE since the due date's today. I'm just going to start off today's session just based on part 2 POE. I know you just submitted part 1, but you might as well get started on part 2 while you are fresh at POEs right now. So just to go through it, so I went through the POE part 2 already and sort of identified where in the learning units and in the themes sort of questions are sitting. Okay, let's see if anybody else joins. If they don't, there is a lot of content that I want to cover today, so unfortunately we don't have too much of time to wait. Whoever joins in, they can just play catch up. So yes, question 1, learning unit 6 in chapter 7, question 2 also in chapter 7, also part of learning unit 6, question 3.1 and 3.2 part of learning unit 7. So learning unit 6 basically we will conclude today. Learning unit 7 will be next week's recording and then finishing off the week after. So that should conclude learning unit 7. You obviously can go through the PACER in your own time just to understand where each one is sitting. Question 4.1 sitting in learning unit 9, chapter 10. 4.2 sitting in learning unit 8, chapter 9. And then you can see the entire of question 5 is sitting in learning unit 10. So learning unit 10, according to our PACER, we need to conclude that in one session, which is actually a recording and not a live lecture. So I'm going to try to split that learning unit up to accommodate for it to fall into our last session, which is the 31st of October. I am hoping that we can conclude it on that particular day. And then if there's any questions in between, just shout and we can run with it. Okay, so all clear on the paces. Anything you are unsure about, please just let me know, and we can conclude. I have shared the pacer already on VC Learn, created it, added it under more resources, and created an announcement. So you already have access to this. So please use that when you can, and when you begin your POE. Your POE is due on the 7th of November. So you have ample time to break that up and then focus on areas that you need to focus on. I will obviously, we are already up to date with our semester pacer. So we're on par and we know exactly what we need to complete and the time period. We do have quite a few learning units to go. I think there's 4 in total with not too much of time. So if I do rush in through content, please stop, ask me questions, drop me mails, drop me WhatsApps, and we can answer the questions. Okay, so learning unit 6 is on material requirements planning system and ERP systems, which is our enterprise resource system. So what is material requirements planning system? So we call it an MRP system in the working place for those who use MRP systems. And it basically is a production planning, scheduling, and inventory management system that is used to basically manage your manufacturing process. So used majority in a manufacturing environment, and its core function is to help the manufacturing department or team within the organization to plan and schedule how the manufacturing process is going to run. Also in terms of what inventory is required, whether it is a raw material, a WIP, which is a work in progress, or if there's a finished requirement. So some of the key functions is inventory control. Yes, definitely car manufacturing or DeFi. I think Some of my examples that I'm using today is car manufacturing. I think that is the perfect example. Also Jaguar, the swear word in this module right now is also, there's a lot of questions that's based off the case study, which continues into POE part 2. So also part of car manufacturing. Big swear word, yeah, definitely. So the first one is one of your functions is inventory control. Basically to make sure that you have the correct material, it's available at the right time for your actual production. You want to ensure you have the right material so that you don't have too much of stock or too little of stock, and your manufacturing process can be continuous and you don't have any bottlenecks or stoppages in your manufacturing process. Stoppages because you have not enough stock can result in costs, a lot of cost in the business. So just making sure that you have a good planning system that ensures that you have the right product and at the right place, whether it is a raw material or a WIP. Production planning basically assists with the production schedule by making sure that the products that needs to be manufactured, and when it needs to be manufactured based on the customer's orders, or also based on what you're forecasting from a demand perspective. So a lot of times, and I think we went through demand planning and forecasting as well, just to make sure that you stay on track with what that forecast is speaking. Your MRP system helps you to coordinate that sort of planning. Scheduling, also very similar to a production planning, basically calculating when materials are required for production, so that you can place the orders to ensure that they're available when you require it. So if you need a raw material, for instance, in the manufacturing process, or a component of a raw material in that manufacturing process, when are you close to having no resources? That's when you need to place an order. Your MRP system will spit out that information. A lot of times, MRP systems are obviously automated. It has an inventory stock count through your WMS system, which is your warehouse management system. They are then able to help you when it comes to scheduling. So many of the manufacturing organizations have automated systems to control this. Back when automation was not a thing with, inventory control and warehouse management, all of this was done manually. So you now had either Excel spreadsheets or pieces of paper where you're now maintaining your number of components is and all of that. Yes, it does. It does include when you have maintenance schedules, when you have downtimes in your production. It'll take all of this into account, even if you have stock counts or stock takes, it'll take all of this into account. Bill of material. So this is something you really need to go through in your time, understanding what is a bill of material, what is the components of a bill of material, how do you now compile a bill of material. This is one of the questions in your POE part 2. So go through various examples, understand those examples so that you can now apply this in your POE. So a bill of material, basically, it relies on having detailed breakdown of what the product structure is. It basically includes the list of all the materials and components that's needed to make a product. Either the material is in-house or it's outsourced, but whatever that requirement is to actually, build a product or the component of, it needs to be listed in your bills of material. As we go along, I'll give you sort of screenshots of examples of what bill of materials look like, or I'll speak to it, just so that you have a very high level understanding, but in your time, go through what bill of materials are. And then lead time management, your MRP system basically helps you to manage the lead time of ordering your materials, when they arrive, when do you need it without causing any delays in production. So a lot of it is pre-planned, everything from inventory control, production planning, scheduling, what bills of material you require, and your lead time management. And overall, it's meant to improve the efficiency of your manufacturing process, help you to reduce any sort of wastage. So if you have too much of stock that is wastage, and also streamline your production process and help you to meet your customers' demand, so that you have optimization in your business. You have a better production process. So MRP systems, thumbs up. It's something that's required, especially if you're in a manufacturing environment. Okay, any questions on this so far? Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I know the textbook sort of overcomplicates it a little bit, but just trying to simplify it and put it into layman's terms does help with the understanding process. Okay, so some of the conditions of MRP system. So we understand what an MRP system is, and these are some of the conditions that make sure that the MRP system can optimize your inventory, can optimize your production process and your procurement process. So the first one is accurate demand forecasting. So the MRP is able to, predict, it basically needs a good demand forecasting or a precise demand forecasting so that you are able to determine what future production is required. If your demand forecast is unpredictable or it fluctuates significantly, the MRP system can struggle quite a bit to schedule your production and schedule your manufacturing process efficiently. So you basically need something that has a clear visibility of your customers' orders, where your seasonal trends are happening, any sort of market forecast. It's required so that the MRP can actually function properly. The well-defined bill of material. So your MRP system relies on an accurate bill of material so that it outlines all the components and all of the raw materials that's needed so you can actually manufacture your product. It must be something that's up to date. It must be clear. It must be concise, so that you can calculate the different materials, that's needed for production. You can imagine if you don't have an accurate bill of material, you don't exactly know what components are required for your manufacturing process. So you can have delays in production. You'll have errors on your production process, and you'll have a lot of wastage because you are wasting time. And we all know, especially from a production process and manufacturing, if you have a line, especially from a car manufacturing perspective, and you're missing a component or missing a portion of your bill of material, you cannot complete it, and line stoppages ends up, the consequences of that is huge. It's cost to business, it's downtime on resources like staff, etc. You're not able to produce on time. You're not able to cater to the demand of your customers. So there's a lot of byproducts if you don't have a well-defined bill of material. You need a stable production plan. Stainless steel. I'm not 100% sure. I'm pretty sure, depending what components goes into it. So if you're in a manufacturing environment and you're producing, as you said, stainless steel, I'm very sure that there's different bills of material that's required for it to actually, for you to actually produce that component or product. So I'm sure maybe there is a bills of material that's required. Organizations will call it something else, but the correct terminology from a supply chain and operations perspective is called a bill of material. Yeah, thank you. Stable production plan. So your MRP obviously works best when your production plan is relatively stable. So where there's no sort of disruption to your manufacturing process. Remember, your production plan is going to include if you do have any sort of service requirements on machineries, take into account, public holidays, all of those things. So you need a good production plan. It needs to be relatively stable. If there's a lot of changes in your production plan and it's sudden changes, your MRP system is going to struggle to keep up with the changes because it's not accounted for. So you can have inefficiencies in the business. You need accurate inventory data. So whether it's real-time data, inventory data, it's quite essential for the manufacturing process. The system needs accurate information on current stock levels. You need to know what is work in progress, what is the different lead times for different materials that you need to order. If you have a poor inventory accuracy, it can basically result in or basically make the system or cause the system to generate incorrect production plans, incorrect orders, etc. Reliable, I think there's a question here. Let me just check that. Is MRP and APO similar? It is. There is a lot of different connotations to what an MRP is. You'll even understand closer to time that an MRP is even very similar to what an ERP is. It sort of evolved into an ERP because the ERP will speak to what is the back end and the front end of the system, whereas an MRP only speaks to the back end. It's not very customer interface, whereas an ERP system speaks to what your customer can see as well as what you are producing at the end. Okay, so at inventory, reliable supplier performance, your MRP is obviously dependent on making sure that your raw materials is delivered on time. And you're getting those various components from your supplier. If your supplier basically, if they fail to deliver on time, your MRP system will be disrupted. So you basically need your suppliers to meet your delivery schedules. Integration with other systems. Your MRP is often part of your broader ERP systems. So it functions best when it's integrated with other systems like your finance side, so like a SAP, for instance, whatever sales program you're using, maybe it's a Salesforce program. What procurement program are you using? Maybe it's an Ariba program, and any supply chain management program. So integration with other systems is what speaks the language. Any organization for that matter, when you have various support functions part of the organization, you want everybody to use one specific system. You don't want various systems talking different languages. So integration and having one sort of ERP system that's speaking to material resources, is speaking to sales, is speaking to procurement, is speaking to finance, everything basically speaks the same language. Consistent lead times. Your MRP system needs to assume that the lead times for buying any material is consistent. If your lead times fluctuate and it's unpredictable, it's very difficult for your MRP system to schedule a production or schedule even procurement, meaning buying a stock or inventory or raw materials from a supplier. And then skilled personnel and effective training. Basically, to operate effectively, your MRP system needs skilled personnel. They need to understand the system. They need to understand the manufacturing process. So you need proper training. There needs to be education for those sort of employees to ensure that the system is used correctly, and they can also adapt the system for any changes that they see that can occur. So basically, your MRP system is going to function when there's a structured environment from a production perspective. You know what your demand forecast is. It's predictable. You have a very stable production and a manufacturing process. You have good data. You have good suppliers. When all of these conditions are met, you can have a very streamlined manufacturing process. You can optimize your resources, and you can reduce any waste within your business. Okay, so that basically speaks on our conditions. Is there any questions, anything else that I can answer before we move on to the next one? Okay, then we have objectives, and you'll see everything sort of speaks the same language from an objective and a condition perspective, etc. But basically, the primary objective of it is to optimize your production, to reduce your costs, and ensure that you have timely product delivery. So you can see the trend in everything that I said, from conditions to objective. It's speaking the same thing about reducing waste and optimizing your production process. These are sort of the terminologies I want you to use when you're going through your POE and you're applying the theory to your case study, and the relevant case studies that's provided to you. These keywords actually makes you speak supply chain, actually makes you speak operations. You need to be able to understand, the backing of it, and explain how is it going to reduce waste, how is it optimizing your production process, how is it making your supply chain more efficient and streamlining it. So this is just terminology, but it's good terminology to use when you are focusing on your POE. Okay, so the first one is ensuring that you have material availability, very similar to what I said with the suppliers, making sure you have a good relationship with your suppliers to make sure that you have the necessary raw materials, components available for your production. Minimizing inventory levels. So the objective is to make sure that you reduce any excess inventory, and only purchasing your materials when it's necessary, so you prevent any overstocking. With overstocking, you can tie up capital or cash in inventory. It can lead to also having storage issues. So you may have a facility that can only carry X amount of stock, and you now have Y amount of stock. So now you run the risk of having to get more resources and more space just to accommodate for that. Also, a lot of times with raw materials, depending in which industry and organization you're in, the stock can have, can be obsolete at some stage. There can be expiration dates on certain elements of raw materials. So it's just taking all of this into account and having an inventory level that is quite minimized, so that you can account for all of these, causes thereof. Optimizing your production schedule with aligning your material availability with the production. The objective of the MRP here is to make sure you have an efficient production schedule, so you don't have that much of idle time for machines, equipment, workers, employees, etc., so that you have efficient production efficiency at the end. Improving customer service. One of the key objectives here is that the products that are manufactured on time, they're delivered on time to your customer. The MRP helps to meet those customer demands. It improves your customer satisfaction, and also, gives you a good reputation as an organization, which is, at the end of the day, that's what a lot of organizations require. It's just to have that good reputation, and the MRP and these various other systems aid in you actually gaining that reputation in the market. Reducing production costs. So the MRP helps to minimize waste, minimize any sort of inefficiencies, both from a material cost and a production cost. So you want to find ways in which you can reduce as much bottlenecks as possible, and then also order material when you require. And then the last one is just to improve the workflow and resource allocation, making sure that the MRP has a very structured approach when it comes to planning and controlling your production process. So ensuring that your resources, like your labor, your machinery, your equipment, etc., is all used in the most optimal way possible. Okay. Then I'm just going to go into dependent demand of your MRP. And I want to start off with the dependency basically of demand means that the demand for one item depends on the demand for another item, okay? Like from a car manufacturing perspective. So I'll use that as an example. So imagine a car manufacturing company, and it produces a vehicle that is, let's say, like a sedan model. The demand for various components like your engine, your tires, your seats is dependent on how many cars the company plans to produce. So for instance, let's look at one car, for example, all right? So I'm using the most simplest example I can I can use it or explain it. So your bill of material for one car, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not a car person or a car salesperson, okay? So the bill of material for one car, for instance, has one engine, 4 tires, 2 front seats, 2 back seats, 1 steering wheel, 4 doors, 1 wheel, windshield, okay? So we'll keep it as simple as possible. So if the company basically plans to produce 200 cars, let's say in October, the dependent demand for each component is then calculated based on the number of cars. So if you have one engine per car, it'll be 200 cars times 1, which gives you 200 engines. Um, if you have 200 cars and 4 tires, you have 800 tires. Your front seat, if you have 200 cars, 400 front seats. The rear seats, you then have 400 of that. Your steering wheel, you have 200. Your doors, you have 800 because it's times 4 doors. And your windshield, you then have 200. So basically, in this example, the demand for each component is dependent on the production of the finished car. So your MRP system will use this information to make sure that the right quantity of each component is ordered and available for assembly at the right time based on what the production schedule is of that specific vehicle. Okay, so I'm glad it makes sense, because how I explained it in terms of your bill of material, that's exactly how a bill of material should work. So when it comes to your POE, that's how you should be looking at it as well. It is going to be broken down in various other factors, which I'll go through, but it's sort of the most simplified way to explain it is how I've just explained it now. Okay. So yes, the core of the MRP is reduction of costs by improving efficiency and minimizing waste. So that's exactly what it is. So some of the dependent demand of MRP, there's 3 different ways of looking at it. Number 1 is managing the demand. So when the organization manages not only the orders that are received from the customer, but also the forecasted demand, it's seen as demand management. So some of the examples of the different processes is keeping an order book. So making sure that, if you have 200 orders, for instance, you have an order book that you're now crossing off. Every sale is being entered into an order book. You have a demand forecast. You have, and then you have final distribution to your customer. Management of customer orders. So your customer orders are basically firm orders that are placed with the organization by your customer. These orders are in an order book and can be changed. For some reason, it's basically very important to manage these orders. So making sure that you keep these intact. If you have 200 orders, you are now making sure that you are delivering 200 orders. And the last one is order variation. Basically happens when your customer now decides to change their mind. They give you very short notice for doing this. So an example here is, imagine you ordered a new item of clothing. So before you actually take delivery of the clothing, you decide to change your mind, and then you inform that specific store that you no longer want it. This is basically the typical example of what happens. It can happen a lot in your manufacturing industry as well as in a lot of service industries. That's why, especially when it's in a manufacturing organization, a lot of organizations put terms to it where you have until X date, basically before it goes into manufacturing and production, especially if it's a customized item, that you cannot change your order, until this date. Well, you have until this date to change your order. So that's basically how it would work. Yeah, exactly. Or if you want to change the color of your car. Okay, so this is the inputs of your MRP system. Okay, so there's 3 basic inputs. The first one is your MPS, and it's basically one of your one of the primary inputs of your MRP system. The demand forms one of the most important inputs for your MPS, and it is basically one of the most important tools when you're planning and controlling the manufacturing function. The second input is your bills of material, which yet again is coming up. And your bill of material is also known as a product structure tree. So think of a tree, everything that belongs in your product, it sits in different branches, and it's basically the list that contains all the items that's needed, whether it's manufactured in-house or it's bought from an outside supplier. There's different sort of bills of materials, okay? And one of it is called a modular board or modular bill, and it's used for products that have modular design, for instance. And it has all the parts of the components required to manufacture an organization's products, and it can be subdivided into different modules that can be interchangeable or replaced when it's required. I think, Francis, you mentioned DeFi. So like DeFi stove, for instance, the oven, the door, the plates can be manufactured as different modules. And these modules are then assembled to make up the stove. Then we have something called a phantom and planning bill of material. And basically, the planning bill is used during the planning stage because the product does not yet exist. So it's basically an artificial parent that's created for that specific product. And then our last input is accurate inventory records. So basically, you need inventory records or accurate inventory records regarding the status of all of your items at specific time period in a specific time bucket. So you need what the gross requirements are for each product, what is the receipt date for that specific product, how much of stock you have on hand, and this basically forms some of the inputs of your MRP system. I think you'll have more of an indication when we go through the structure, and the structure looks at the different terminologies. So remember these 6 points in terms of the structure of the MRP. The first one is your gross requirement, and this is basically the total demand that can be expected for any item in a specific period. So the gross requirement does not take into account any stock on hand of that specific item. The requirements of finished items are derived from your schedules. Your schedule receipts, these are open orders that is still outstanding. It means that the orders have been placed at the supplier, but you haven't yet received it. Projected on hand, this quantity is the expected amount of any item that will be available at the beginning of a specific period. Net requirements is the exact amount of an item that is required in a specific period. Planned order receipt is the amount of material that is expected to be received at the beginning of a period which is required. And then planned order releases is the amount of an item that an organization plans to order in a specific period. These 6 points, we don't have the time to really spend too much of time on it, but I want you to read it, understand it, and understand how you can then structure your MRP using these 6 points. Your bills of material also fall within it, and then you'll be able to understand more of how the MRP structure is now being built. So a little bit of an example, and I'm going to try my best to explain it to you guys, okay? So there's a company that wants to produce 100 wooden tables, okay? Each table requires different components, and the demand for these components is obviously dependent on the number of tables that they want to produce. So your MPS, which is your production schedule, specifies that the number of wooden tables that need to be produced, and in this case, it's 100 tables. Okay, so your finished product is 100 wooden tables. Your bill of material shows the breakdown of all materials and components that is needed to build each table. So for instance, to build one table, you need one table top, you need 4 legs, you need 5 screws for attaching the legs, and you need 1 varnish can, and we're keeping it simple, okay? Your inventory status records, or basically what you need from an inventory perspective, tracks the available stock of components and the raw material even before your production begins. So the tabletops in stock is now 20 units. The table legs in stock is 100 units, your screws has 200, and your varnish cans has 10 units. So the sort of logic behind it is how much from a tabletop perspective is required. Remember, we want to build 100. How much do we have on hand? I mentioned we've got 20. So the net requirement of that is 100 minus 20 is then 80. So which means our planned order release then becomes that we need to order 80 more tabletops. For the legs example, we require 100 legs times 4, which gives us 400. We have 100 legs on hand, so our net requirement then becomes 400, which we require, minus the 100 that we have on hand. So we now need 300 legs, which means we need to have a planned order release of 300 legs. The screws, we have 100 times 5, which gives us 500 screws is what we need. We've got 200 screws on hand, so 500 minus 200 then gives us 300 screws. That's how much we need to now order. Varnish cans, we require 100. We now have 10 on hand. 100 minus 10 gives us 90. We now need to order 90 varnish cans. So the orders are basically scheduled based on the production timeline and the lead time that we need for the product to be basically delivered to our customer. If the tabletops, for instance, takes 2 weeks to arrive and the legs take 1 week, the system ensures that the materials are ordered in time to start the production that it was planned. So you are ordering it in time for arrival on the day that you're starting production. So you order 2 weeks in advance for your tabletops, 1 week in advance for your legs, for instance. So that's how the MRP system is going to work. Yes, there is safety stock that would be involved. And you'll see as we go down. I think the example I'm just trying to create with you is just to understand how the specific MRP system would work. There 100% be safety and buffer stock that you would require. We all know the materials that we get from various suppliers, sometimes not all the quality that is, the quality of products or raw materials that's given to us is not always on par or the same. So there has to, at every stage, I think, have a safety or a buffer stock. And you'll see as we go along in the MRP how safety and buffer stock, safety stock and sort of lot sizes basically comes into play. And I'll explain that as we go further. Okay. So we understand how the structure works. I think when you work on it from an example perspective, it's actually quite fun because you're able to understand exactly what planned order releases you need, what receipts you need, how much you have on hand, what is the net requirement, etc. Okay, so let's go on to the outputs of the MRP. So the output of the MRP is basically the information that management requires. It's the reporting mainly, and there's 2 types of reports. Number one is your primary report, which is your main report that is being now produced. And it's your production planning and control and inventory that is part of the main report or the primary report. And basically, they'll be able to provide different schedules for what future material you need, how much of material is required for demand, etc. And then your secondary report is the reports that deal with measuring the performance of your planning process, any exception reports, if something went through the production process and spat out as an error, how can you now deal with that? That becomes your sort of secondary report. Any sort of major deviation from your production, like late delivery of your orders, or if you have an overdue order, any errors in planning, etc., those reports now come into play as a secondary report as part of your output of an MRP. So your input is your bills of materials, your outputs are then your reports thereof. The aspects of MRP, so once you as a production manager, manufacturing manager, operations manager is now, very well versed in terms of your output, your inputs, your processing of your MRP system. You also need to understand other portions of it, which is safety stock, number one. So if you have a good MRP system, no organization if you have a dependent demand, as we had mentioned, should hold safety stock that's below the finished product level. The reason for that is they're able to sometimes predict precisely what the usage is. However, in real life, there's always exceptions. Somewhere in the process, there will be a bottleneck. The bottleneck is basically occurs when if items in the manufacturing process collect at a particular position in your manufacturing process, and it's processing basically much slowly than the rest of the process. So it results in a lot of shortages, a lot of idle time. Your machines are not working as quickly as you need. So safety stock is your buffer stock, and that's when you need to now bring that into play. And it basically compensates for any unexpected fluctuations in your demand. So if you now have to produce 100 tables, and you have 100 forecasted or demand forecast for orders, and now you have 105, if you've only managed to order components and material for 100, how are you now supposed to produce the balance of the 5? So your buffer stock and your safety stock accounts for that sort of unplanned event. And you're able to still have customer satisfaction because you've now catered to buffer and safety stock. Buffer and safety stock should never be something that is too much, purely because you end up tying in capital and cash in that specific stock, and you're not able to then produce and sell it. So just take into account when you are going through an MRP system and planning it. The second part of it is then lot sizing. Lot sizing is basically selecting the optimal size of a batch of products that needs to be manufactured to meet the requirements of the process. For every order that's placed by an organization, there's definitely cost that occurs. And it's important that the costs are then minimized by the inventory system of a specific organization. And it's evenly distributed throughout the planning process. So we just need to make sure that we have an optimal amount so that we have good economies of scale and can then counter for the manufacturing process. Okay. Perfect plan is to have stock arrive a few hours before the last stock in inventory is used. That is basically the perfect plan. Unfortunately, it doesn't always occur in that specific way. There's a lot of outsourcing that happens with a lot of organizations, and you rely on your suppliers a lot. So unfortunately, if you can, if the planning was that great, you can do that. We have working in a logistics environment and dealing with a lot of customers that requires their stock in time. There's a lot of cases where we see, especially if you are importing some of those components that's required for your manufacturing process, delivery times are not always consistent. So businesses spend tons and tons of money just importing components and parts that's required in their manufacturing process. If there's a line stoppage, for instance, they're now doing hand carry or exceptional cargo freight from like Germany, for instance, just so that there's no stoppage in their production process. So, best case scenario is to always have a standby and a safety stock, but it can be very expensive to do that. So it's sometimes even cheaper to do a hand carry than it is to just hold that stock on hand. So yeah, that's basically how it works. The next one, and this goes now into theme 2 of our Learning Unit 6, and it's our enterprise resource planning. So basically what enterprise resource planning is, it's basically a comprehensive system software used by a lot of businesses to integrate and manage key business processes. So some of your key business processes is finance, procurement, human resources, inventory, production, sales, supply chain within one specific system. So all the systems are now talking to each other. And the integration provides a very centralized view of different data and different processes. So a lot of times when organizations have different systems that speak different languages, like as I gave you the example, if finance is sitting on a SAP system, procurement is sitting on an Ariba system, sales is sitting on a Salesforce system, manufacturing is sitting on an MRP system, someone in finance doesn't have access to what the MRP system is looking for. Someone in procurement doesn't know what the P&L is looking like because they create pure numbers on specific orders. Everyone basically needs to speak the same language. So ERP systems is basically the way to go so that everybody has one view of it. You have an integration of different business functions. You're using one platform. You have a lot of collaboration between your departments, and it's not everybody now sitting in silos. There's one vision, one goal, one mission statement of the organization, and everyone's speaking that language. You have a centralized database. So they use a common database for different business processes. So your data is consistent, it's up to date across all the departments. Like, for example, in a sales module automatically updates inventory, finance, and production modules. So when I was years ago in a manufacturing organization, being in a account manager sales sort of environment, commercial environment, I had full view of what the production schedule was, which was great because then I could plan and speak to my customers and tell my customers, okay, your planning is set for the 20th of September. It's going to end on the 24th of September. You're going to get your product on the 28th of September. So I'm able to speak that language to the customer because I have the knowledge of it through the ERP system. Okay, so I hope everyone sort of understood it from that example. Automation of processes. So ERP automate some of the manual or the repetitive tasks, such as if you are doing payroll, if you're tracking an order, if you're doing financial reporting. So all of these systems is automated. So there's less human error, there's more productivity. You're focusing on things that you need to focus on. You're not focusing on stuff that used to be a manual process previously. And then the last one is scalability and customization. So organizations can basically implement specific functions they need and scale up as the business grows. So you can customize different modules in the ERP system according to how many salespeople you have or how many suppliers you have from a procurement perspective, so that it's very unique for your specific company. So if you want to see from a procurement perspective, if you have an order that you place and you now need to create a PR, send it to the supplier so they can produce the order, then create a PO number and then GR in that PO number and then provide it to a customer to invoice you. All of this is customized, and not every organization works in this specific way. So it's now how can you basically use that customization from an ERP side and bring it into the business. So just an example from an ERP perspective. So look at a sort of manufacturing company. So basic manufacturing company that uses an ERP system in its entire operation. So your sales team basically says that they have an order for 500 units of the product. The ERP system basically checks your inventory to see if you have enough raw materials that are available. If not, then the procurement module then generates purchase orders for that specific raw material that's required. The production module schedules the manufacturing process, whilst the finance module records the sales order so that they could invoice the customer. The warehouse module then updates the stock level once the order is fulfilled and it's shipped off. Throughout the process, the HR module tracks every single employee's working hours and payroll for the staff involved in production and in logistics. So that's how the business would work. It's not working in different silos. Everybody's now speaking to each other and you're working off one specific system. So it integrates all business functions, streamlines your operations so that your business basically works in a single real-time data set. Okay, so it's a very powerful tool. It's a tool that basically helps organizations to manage their business processes better, more efficiently, more unified, and it integrates quite well. So some of the key examples, I'll go through here. So some of the key examples from let's go here, and let's go to our e-commerce. Okay, so do we know what e-commerce is? The concept of electronic commerce. Nobody ever says it's called electronic commerce. Everyone always says e-commerce. So it basically is a system that lets individuals, organizations communicate using EDI, FTP, fax, email, and the internet. Okay. And the rise of e-commerce has basically impacted ERP systems because it allows now for businesses to lead the changes and to basically operate more efficiently. And it's, in layman's terms, it's the buying and selling of goods and services over the internet. That's exactly what it is. All of us take part, or most of us take part in e-commerce. You know, you're buying something off Takealot, that's e-commerce. You're buying something off Shein, that's Takealot. Now it's Temu. So when you're buying stuff online, basically that's what electronic commerce is, and ERP systems are the backbone of e-commerce. So key impacts of e-commerce on ERP systems. Number one is there's a front end and a back end. Okay, so your front end of your e-commerce platform or your ERP is where your customer interacts with you. So they go onto Shein, they say, I like this dress, I like this toy, I like this shoe, and then they basically place their order, they make their payment. The ERP system then manages the back end of the operation, right? Inventory management, order fulfillment, the logistics of it. And there's obviously the growing need to integrate the e-commerce platforms with ERP systems for smooth operations. So as a logistics industry or a logistics service provider, we are integrated, or we create APIs that integrate to the ERP systems of various organizations, so that when you as a customer place an order, that information is immediately pulled through to a logistics portion of the ERP system. And then I know I need to now send a driver to X location to collect your parcel and now deliver it to Y location. So that's how the systems are now speaking to each other. From a warehouse management or an inventory control perspective, if you are now placing your order for SKU1, which is a red dress and red shoes, when you place your order, you need to know that, and you've now paid for your order, you want your product or your order, there needs to be inventory that's available. If ERP systems are not speaking to each other, you now go through the process of falling in love with this dress. You now make your payment, so it's a cost to you. And when the order now gets to the organization, they realize, geez, we don't have any stock of this item left. Now they have to make contact with you and tell you, I'm so sorry, I don't have this item anymore. Please choose something else. So there's a lot of work that goes into the back end, and a lot of e-commerce businesses now are going the route of having ERP systems so that everyone's talking to each other. They're spending a lot of money on making sure that their inventory levels or inventory stock is speaking to their website. And by doing that, they have customer satisfaction. If you go through a traumatic experience of falling in love with the dress and then being told that there's no stock available, you immediately are disgusted by that organization and you don't actually want to buy back. So there's a lot of customer sales based on that. So ERP systems, a lot of times what happens from an e-commerce perspective is they ring fence some of their stock, meaning that if they have a physical store, like a brick and mortar store, and they have an online website, they ring fence the stock so that online speaks to online and distribution or B2B speaks to B2B. But the stock is not mixed up, and the ERP system is customized in that way to speak to that stock level. Okay. Then we go on to real-time inventory, operating in real time, 24/7. So if you're sitting late at night and you now are busy online shopping, you're able to have real-time visibility into the inventory that's part of that specific business, so that there's no, overselling or back orders, etc. So the ERP system now adapts to providing accurate and up-to-date inventory across the various warehouses they have, various locations that they have, etc. Automation and order processing. So e-commerce they can generate high volumes of orders. So that's where automation now comes into play. You need efficiency in the business. So whether it's how do you now put a sales order through, then you get an order number when you have a sale, how you get an invoice, and then the shipping information, and then how is it shipped to you. So all of this is quite automated. You have a better customer experience. From browsing through the product to ordering it to checking it and then having it delivered. So it's all supported by an ERP system. You have data synchronization. So you have a lot of data based on your customers' ordering capacity, customers' behavior, what's the daily sales trend, what's the order history, and the data is synchronized with different ERP systems. Like for instance, I'll use Charity as an example. Let's say she orders on Shein a lot, and Shein then uses that data to say, Charity, I see you order a lot. Here's 150 Rand gift voucher for you. Or Charity, I see that it's your birthday on the 19th of September. Here's 100 Rand off as a birthday special. So they use that sort of data that they have based on the information you're now providing to them. And they kick off various specials, various seasonalities, to basically, as a marketing strategy to get you to keep coming back and buying more. Multiple channel operations involves selling through multiple channels, like your website, like places like Takealot, Amazon, eBay, Marketplace, all of those different channels. And your ERP system then needs to support the multi-channel operation so that you have centralized orders, you have enough inventory to account for that specific stock. And all of this is possible. I mean, I see various businesses that sell to retailers like your Massmarts and Game. They sell to Takealot. They sell on their own website. They sell within a store. And all of these different warehouse options are synchronized and able to offer the multi-channel option as well. Scalable and flexible. So as your business grows from an electronic commerce perspective, ERP systems also need to scale up. They need to be able to handle the increasing order volumes. If you're introducing new product lines to the market, if you are now expanding into a specific geographical location like a Western Cape or an Eastern Cape, etc., if you're adding in more warehouses, it needs to be able to account for these scalable solutions. Older sort of ERP system, it wasn't built to accommodate the rapid growth, but now obviously it's more flexible, it's more scalable, it's very cloud-based system, so you can expand as much as you want, grow as much as you want, and they're able to be flexible enough to customize the ERP system to fit you. Improve supply chain. E-commerce increases your complexity of your supply chain. You then have various supply chains in your organization because you're now dealing with the different ways of customers and means of customers. And as your businesses deal with multiple suppliers and distribution partners, there needs to be coordination between them. And therefore, you require an ERP system that can manage those different capabilities. payment gateway and sorry, mind my spelling error there, and financial integration. So you need multiple payment gateways. Like I know a lot of e-commerce customers or organizations use PayPal, PayFast. Newer one was PeachPay. So yeah, there we go. PayPal, Zapper as well. So using these different payment gateways and then integrating that into the ERP system so that you have, your tax reporting, financial management, it all needs to speak to each other. So if an order is placed on the system and then you get a PayFast or a Zapper link or whatever it is, you make your payment, then your order needs to go into fulfilled so that your inventory or your dispatch area needs to now dispatch it, and then your courier or delivery partner can take it out for delivery. So everyone needs to now talk to each other. And then the last one is customization and personalization. So e-commerce businesses, many times it's a very personal experience, customer experience. You're offering customized products or customized pricing on, to different products and different customers. So your ERP system needs to be able to support these personalized features by managing the data and the information that you basically put into the system. And modern ERP system allows for this customization. They allow for the data to support having personalization, and they're able to offer organizations very tailor-made experiences so that you're not sacrificing any operational inefficiencies or operational efficiencies. You still have an efficient business and you can still have personalization and customization in it as well. Okay. So I enjoyed that module. I really do like MRP and ERPs and speaking e-commerce. Is there any questions so far? No questions. Okay. So the learning unit that we covered today, learning unit 6, in your POE, yeah, I think it's question 1 and 2 as per the PASA. So just look at that. Okay. Yeah, that's it. Question 1 and question 2. I'm just looking at it now. So I think you can start with POE part 2 while MRP and bill of materials is fresh in your head. I think you can start it already. Yeah, no, we definitely all speak online shopping. Definitely do. So thank you guys. Thank you for joining me this evening. I am looking forward to marking your POEs. I will be starting tomorrow, and it generally takes about 8 days or so. So you should just expect your results in 2 weeks, but I'll just keep you updated as we go along. And once your results are captured, etc., you'll be able to see your grading in roughly about 2 weeks' time. Okay. Thank you. Have a lovely evening, and we will chat soon. You too. Have a lovely Heritage Day.